almost 2 years ago, fighting and winning a by-election in the process. So I guess that makes him probably the most prominent Conservative fighting this election who's not fully paid-up member of Team Dave.
Well, I think I'm a paid-up member of Team Dave, actually.
Yeah, I was going to say, in that leadership contest which you fought against David Cameron, you debated him several times, including on Sky News. How do you rate him as a debater?
Oh, pretty good. I mean, we had conversations about it while we were doing it, and actually I said at the time, and he agreed, that this meant that the next prime ministerial contest would be debated on television.
I think you did help open the door.
I think well, for your campaign, which actually succeeded, so we can be mutually congratulatory on that. Anyway,
but I mean, there is a perception that, you know, to stay even, he's almost got to win these now. Yeah, because he's good at it.
He has got that extra hurdle to get over. There's no doubt about that, because people see him on PMQs, they see him on telly. He's a good telly performer, and that's as it were the handicap he goes in with. That being said, you know, he's quick. He's clever. He's got a good style. I mean, you know better than me. So, you know, I think this is going to be OK. I mean, although having said that, the big gainer from this is going to be Clegg, not us. That's no doubt.
I mean, there is a sense, though, that David Cameron, I mean, he worked in PR, in television, that he is a bit of a PR man, that perhaps there isn't the substance there.
No, I don't agree with that. And I think we're seeing some of that in the last week with the national insurance and the marriage tax benefit. These things you begin to see a bit of the real Cameron showing, you know, the real Conservative Cameron. You know, he's a nice man, but he's also a Tory.
Now, where are we, do you think, in this campaign? I mean, opinion polls seem to be saying, you know, certainly you're not remotely sure of winning this one outright.
Well, not outright at the moment. I mean, the two things. First thing, what's happened the last couple of weeks has been consolidation, really. We've moved by about a point, and that's what we're seeing on the ground. Lots of optimism on the ground, interestingly, in my local marginal seats. The other thing to remember, however, in this is it's where the votes are as much as how many there are. I mean, you'll remember in 1992, we had the biggest vote in history for the Tory party, and we dropped our majority by 80 seats to 21 seats. This time around, it's where the votes are, and I think the marginal seats are going to be very important for us. And I think
News of the World poll today, not that good news.
Interesting, because that's not. I mean, I'm in the north of England, where we're supposed to be having difficulty. I mean, Brigg and Gould's my next door seat, used to be part of mine, and this last week or so, we're seeing a sort of clear uptick on the ground. Now, it's not complete. We haven't won this by any means yet, but I'm confident. Confident's the wrong word. I think that the probability is we're going to get a majority out of this.
And do you think there is now a sort of two-pronged attack on the Conservatives from Liberal Democrats and Labour?
Well, yes, and there's a reason for that too. I mean, the Liberal. I mean, I read this morning's papers about Nick Clegg's comments on our policies. I thought it's a bit OTT for him. He's not normally an OTT character, and that suddenly occurred to me. Actually, the other thing that's been happening in the last week or two, the real swings have been between Labour and Liberals, backwards and forwards, and of course, the Liberals are fighting primarily their target seats are actually Labour seats. My nearest one is North Hull. That's where they're attacking now, not the Tory seats. And so this is a battle, if you like, for the progressive vote, if you want to use their parlance for it. I don't view it as progressive at all, but that's what the battle's over. And so we'll see a lot of two-pronged attacks on us. You'll see that, of course, reinforced in the debate. I actually think at the end of it, that may not even work to our disadvantage, because if David's forced to defend himself against these two people, I think you'll get the best out of him.
Why don't you think Liberals are progressive?
I said it's a progressive vote. That's not the same thing. Right. They're quite progressive, although they're not always as reliable as I mean,
on civil liberties, for example, they would go more in your direction than perhaps David Cameron would.
To be fair to them, on things like civil liberties, they are absolutely squarely in the place I'd want them to be. So that's all right.
And further in that direction?
No, not necessarily further. I mean, after all, it was a Tory MP who had the by-election, not a Liberal one.
Chris Grayling, speculation again this morning that after his latest mishap over bed and breakfast that he might not be asked to be Home Secretary if David Cameron wins the election. If he comes back to you and says, I'd like you to be Home Secretary, will you say yes?
Look, I've always said this is not my decision. I'm happy either where I am, being constructively helpful on the back benches or on the front benches, and it's as simple.
No, I understand that, but if asked to serve, would you serve?
I'm not going to compound Chris's difficulties at the moment. You know, I hope that the decisions on who's going to be the Home Secretary are not made on the basis of one piece of taped information from one meeting.
Yeah, but there have been several mistakes, haven't there?
Yeah, but you know what this is like. What happens in politics? You make one mistake, and then people follow you around with a tape recorder. So
but at the same time, people do wonder why you're outside Team Dave. I mean, obviously you're supporting the Conservatives in this election. Stanley's the Conservative, but why aren't you closer in the team?
Well, that's for David to decide, not for me. I mean, I've said all along, I'm happy to be in and happy to be outside. Look, let's understand something.
Is it because you didn't go to Eton?
No, no, absolutely not. But let's understand something else about being a backbench MP. One of the great problems, particularly at the moment, after all the expenses scandal, is people don't see the power of what a backbench MP can do. They can do an awful lot. And if need be, I'll give you a tutorial in this in the next 2 years.
So are you saying, if asked, you will serve, but your preference would be to be on the backbench?
Yeah, you can put it that way, yeah.
Right, OK.
Yeah.
And there seems to be a slight, I don't know, I'd call it sort of geezer culture about this campaign. We've had Michael Caine out there, the Chelsea pensioners.
Oh, geezer in that sense.
Chelsea pensioners, and then we've had David Cameron being happy to be compared to Gene Hunt. I mean, was that what you'd say, that the geezer in this campaign is David Cameron?
Yeah, well, I suppose it could be. It's also, of course, maybe somebody's recognising behind the scenes that actually more than half the voters are over 55, and that's quite important in this, that it isn't just a battle. It isn't just a battle over the young celebrities.
Oh, so Michael Caine has got pensioner appeal, you think?
Oh, yeah. Don't put words in my mouth. He's a very, very good actor, and he's got appeal in places which perhaps others haven't. Yeah.
You're working at the moment on the banking crisis and the decision coming out of that. Are you hearing anything from any of the parties that you think is on the right lines?
Oh, I mean, I'm hearing bits from all of them. But the reason we had this all-party and expert commission is because in the battles that go on across the chamber, you lose the important, cold, analytical view that you need to have. I mean, everybody wants to lynch bankers and cut their bonuses to nothing and so on. Really, there are much more fundamental problems under all of this. And what I'm hoping is that whoever wins, 2 weeks after the next election, I'll be able to go to the Chancellor at the time, and say, this is our carefully considered set of proposals that work together. It's not one proposal here, one proposal there. It's a thought.
But what is the major thrust?
Well, the biggest single. Well, the trouble is, this is what you call a multi-causal problem. But there's a big long-term problem of the loose monetary policy, and there are some very serious structural problems inside banking in terms of the incentives that exist. It does relate to bonuses to some extent. The incentives that exist to provide the sort of banking we need, and we're not getting that.
Do you think, for example, this idea Labour are going to launch tomorrow of the People's Bank, of combining the post office and all the rest of it into having a sort of controlled, easy, small loan bank?
Interestingly, there are two sort of good ideas conflated in that. One is you actually need more competition in this area. Big four banks is not good enough. You need many, many more. And the second point to bear in mind is that a lot of people want very, very simple banking, very cheap, very simple banking. If it encourages that, I would support it. But it's not enough. But it's a small piece.
Because he does talk about limiting interest rates, and I just wonder, in an international financial community, can you limit interest rates?
Well, I presume that is so that to guarantee a sort of high safety exercise. It's very hard to know how you're going to do that. I'd look at the detail, but the truth of the matter is, it's not as simple as one little thing like this. It's a much, much bigger problem.
And are you dismayed that really none of the party campaigns are concentrating on this central issue of really coming to terms with the deficit and the debt, that we're not hearing enough on that?
Oh no, I think we saw, up until about April of last year, that was undoubtedly true. Everybody was sort of leaning back from the problem because the answers are painful. Let's not kid ourselves. I mean, of course, David said the other morning on a radio program, he said, look, this is not enough. Efficiency cuts will not be efficiency improvements will not be enough by themselves. There's a sort of painful phase to come, whoever's in power. But no, I think from about April last year that we suddenly started to see, particularly the Tory party, actually being much more straightforward and upfront about it, and that's a good thing. That's what the public want.
And are you the man David Cameron should be most worried about, or is that Boris Johnson?
Worried about? The next Prime Minister worried about anybody?
David Davies, thank you very much indeed. This is Sky News, and coming up, The leader of the Green Party, Caroline Lucas, discusses her party's chances on May the 6th.